everybody. Welcome back to the RFL podcast. The season has literally just begun today. We're a little bit behind in our timing of this podcast, but we still have enough time to give you projections, predictions, and our thoughts on every single team in the RFL. And of course, to break this down with me, I have Wobbegong back as always. Wobbegong, the season started. I saw you got a win today. Pretty comfortable, 20-0. Happy so far?
Yes. So, I'm not sure what to think about defense yet. I think no reason for overreactions after just one game, but defense stepping up big with 0 points allowed. So I'm really happy. Win is always nice to start off with a win, and looking at our division, 4 out of the 5 teams won. So yeah, we're looking for a very, very tough year, I think. And we will talk about that today. So hopefully we won't make too many overreactions just on week 1. But let's see what we think about all the 28 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who followed the podcast over the seasons, we typically do one episode on the NFC and one on the AFC. As we are behind schedule, we are just doing one bumper podcast today, I should say. So strap yourselves in. It's going to be a long one, and we're going to get through every single team, and we are going to do it in a slightly different style this year. Typically, we look at the division, we go through every single team, and we sort of do a bit of back and forth. But this time, we've decided to try and mix it up a little bit. So we are still going to talk about every single team, every single division, talk about who we think are going to be in the playoffs, who we think could be Super Bowl champions at the end of all of it. But we are going to talk about a couple of things in detail about each team. We have divvied up the teams in half, so you'll see myself will be talking for a little bit, Wobbegong will be talking for a little bit, we'll be debating it, but we've basically tasked ourselves with identifying one key strength for each team, and this could be anything from a player to the GM to anything we like. If we just like the team logo, we'll probably just say that. If we like the key weaknesses, so anything we don't like about the team, we'll try and pull those out as well. And then we're going to ask ourselves, really, what is one critical factor that this team needs to be successful? It could be 10 seasons, it could be 5 seasons, it could be one missing piece, it could be injury-free, it could be absolutely anything. We have tasked ourselves with thinking about, for this team to be successful, what do they need? And then we're going to sort of run through, as I said, each division, each team in that sense, talk about who we think is going to be in the playoffs before we kind of come to the end of Wobbegong, and we talk about who we think could be Super Bowl champions at the end of this. And I have to say, my record is looking pretty good with the Redskins after last season. Yours is looking pretty atrocious right now, so you have a lot of climbing to do to get yourself back up in the territory. Let's get ourselves started. I mean, we're going to kick ourselves off with the AFC. Not the AFC. We'll do the NFC first, as we usually do. And we're going to go in, just for anyone who's following, just wants to know about their team, we are going to go in the order of sort of win-losses last year. So in terms of how those divisions finished is how we are going to talk about each team this year. So, of course, we had to start with the NFC. And, of course, we had to start with the Super Bowl champions, the Washington Redskins. And I'm delighted that I got the Washington Redskins as the team to talk about, because there is a lot to talk about with this team in particular. I mean, we kind of alluded on the last podcast with free agency and draft and so on. But, if I'm trying to narrow it down in terms of what I think the key strength is of this team, to be honest with you, there's quite a lot. But if I'm going to narrow it down, I think there's a couple of things. And when I look at really what this team is very good at, of course I can talk about Kelly, and I'm sure he'll come up in discussion in a minute. But there's one key thing that I really love about this team, and that is Marcus Allen. Probably one of the best running backs in the league. There's no denying that. But he has probably one of the best offensive lines to get him open, get him running space. We're talking about the likes of Hill. We're talking about McKnight. We're talking about some really, really solid players. Bostic, really good offensive line. And that's what I think is the strength of this team, because it allows someone like Kelly to be versatile, to get himself a bit of space and a bit of time. So for me, I think the key strength is basically making sure that explosive running game continues to operate as it has done previously. If I'm talking about the weaknesses, clearly there is one gap, and it's not really a weakness. I mean, the starting rotation of pretty much offense and defense is pretty good for this team. I think the one thing I would say is really the quarterback situation. So we've obviously got Kelly, and I know this firsthand. If Kelly gets injured, I certainly will be worried if Mark Malone has to play any games this year for the Redskins. Given they're in a very competitive division, I think that could possibly mean they drop games if they have that injury happen. So it is no surprising that when I talk about the critical success factor for this team, I am looking at Allen and Kelly. Basically, this team has got to keep both of these guys healthy. They don't have a huge drop off at quarterback, they have a huge drop off at running back. If they can keep those two guys healthy, that offense is going to continue to be one of the best in the league. And, I think it's going to be very hard to not see them back in sort of playoff territory and back in sort of contending territory this year. Wobbegong, your thoughts on the Redskins?
Yeah, I agree. They have to be one of the Super Bowl favorites. They have such a great team and use their 2 first-round picks to trade for proven talent in Jeff Bostic, center, and also Jerry Holmes. And yeah, this team is just getting better. They look really, really good. And yeah, there's no reason to think that they should get worse this season. So I totally agree. Looking pretty good for the Washington Redskins. And yeah, they have to be the favorite to at least make another playoff run. Yeah, with that, let's look at the second team. The Cowboys finished 9-7 last year and missed the playoffs, and that's something that we have not had in Dallas Cowboys RFL history. In the seasons before, I think we played 8 seasons. They won twice at the RFL and made the playoffs all seasons except from last season. And so they're trying to bounce back. And when we look at key strengths, you have to go with the quarterback running back duo, Warren Moon and Tony Dorsett, that they drafted in the first years of the league. Warren Moon comes from a really, really good season with 40 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Before that, 0 interceptions and always a completion percentage around 70% over the last couple of years. So he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he has a really versatile weapon in Tony Dorsett. He's a running back, and he's really, really, really good in running, but he also has 83 hands, and with that, he is the best receiving back in the league, and also helps Warren Moon, had 386 receiving yards last year, 518 the year before that. So Tony Dorsett, really good receiving back. This is my key strength, but talking about receivers, and I'm skipping the weakness, I will come to that in a second. The receivers are the critical success factors for me because, maybe for the first time in forever, it's not a good receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Their star is Drew Pearson, but he's also 34 years old and the best wide receiver. They have Mike Quick, who has been a former first-round pick for the Dallas Cowboys, and then 2 new additions. They traded for Gerald McRae from my Buffalo Bills. He's fast, but let's see if he can be a reliable number 3 for them. And also they drafted Jesse Hester in the 2nd round. Not the fastest one, but wide receivers is a critical success factor for the Cowboys. And the weakness, trying to make it quick, when we look at the age structure, 16 players are over 30 years old. And when we look at the top 15 players of the Dallas Cowboys, only 3 players are under 30 years old. So the weakness is maybe the future. So they are in the win now mode, thinking they have a chance to make the playoffs, but for the upcoming years, they definitely need to get younger to stay successful and make the playoffs also in the future.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. This is a team that's built to win now, given the age structure. I think the receiving core is going to be interesting. I think they're going to lean heavily on their tight end situation, where they do have 2 good receiving tight ends in Saudi and likes of Winslow. So I think that's where they're going to lean in terms of trying to get some of those receiving numbers up. But yeah, Dallas, I mean, they were 9-7 last year. I remember we talked about them throughout the season where we kind of said, are they going to fall away this year? I think it's the same question we ask every year about Dallas recently, is this the time that Dallas falls away, or are they still going to be in the playoff hunt? I think, personally, there's just too much talent on the roster for them to fall away. I still think they're going to be up there. I think as we all know with the NFC, I mean, you basically need to win 10 games or more to get into the playoffs, and they're going to be on that boundary situation, I think, still. I don't think they've done enough to get themselves over the hump in terms of talent, but that's just such a fine margin. That's kind of where I see them landing really. Let's move on to the Eagles. So the Philadelphia Eagles last year were 9-7 again, similar to Dallas. They just squeaked out of the playoffs. Guess kind of a team in some similar situation issues, but some slightly different challenges to them. So if you look at their running back situation, this is their strength, right? They have got two of the best running backs. They've got Munchie and Wilder, and again, supported by a solid offensive line. That's the kind of key thing that I see with them here. In particular, we're looking at guys like Newton and stuff. So their running game is going to be really, really good this year. But when we turn it over and look at sort of the weakness, and I'm gonna put it out. I think for me, the weakness actually is the quarterback situation for the Eagles. And I know this is going to sound shocking for some teams, but Joe Ferguson, I don't think is quite living up to the hype over the past couple of years in Philadelphia. His numbers, accuracy still looks okay, but he is getting to the point now where he is starting to kind of, I think, hit some of that decline. His interception numbers are kind of starting to tweak up over the past couple of years. The touchdowns are kind of nowhere near where they were at the beginning of his Philadelphia era. And for me, I think it might be that volatility at quarterback that is going to be the thing that holds up this Eagles team. He's 35 years old now. Does he really still have it in him to kind of do it? I mean, his accuracy's gone down a lot. We look at sort of the progression charts in particular. We can see like that speed is sort of dropping off now. The agility, the accuracy had a huge hit this off season. So for me, I think maybe it's the time that they move on from Ferguson. I think that's going to hold them back. But yeah, when we talk about sort of the critical success factor, it is going to be this combination of what I've described on offense. So this offensive line has got to be at its absolute best. One, to allow that elite running back situation with Munchie and Wilder to kind of pursue its strengths, but also it's going to have to give Ferguson a lot more time than probably has historically to get the ball off. He's going to struggle with some of that, and whether the game plan is going to have to change to kind of get to that, I think this could be interesting because, as we know, and we've seen in the past with draft day sports, sometimes when you get to some of these quarterbacks and they're not quite got the ratings they had historically, they can't quite hit some of the numbers and some of the plays that you expect them to. You start tweaking the playbook and it's a downhill battle. So for me, I think the Eagles are probably one of the teams I personally don't think are going to make the playoffs this year.
Interesting, especially the take with the QB situation, but I fully agree. Ferguson had his best years, one very impressive MVP season, but also the owner or GM officially says that they're in a rebuild year. And given the first game, I said we don't want to make any overreactions, but could be the case that this is maybe a down year for the Eagles and they're looking into rebuilding or retooling the team. Yeah, another good team and a team that historically we both liked a lot and always thought, well, they could win the division. It's the St. Louis Cardinals, and they have such a good roster. The strength, of course, needs to be Walter Payton. You don't have to look at anyone else. He's maybe the best player in the league, 31 years old, 100 overall running back, but his numbers are impressive. He's multiple-time MVP in this league. He had 20 rushing touchdowns last year, 2,611 yards rushing, and on top of that, nearly 300 receiving yards. He's just such a good weapon, and every opposing defense needs to scheme around Walter Payton. He's the key strength. Weakness, I think it's depth for the Cardinals because they have such good players on every position, but only 2 running backs on the roster. What if Peyton gets injured or the backup Ivory, who's behind that? Only 2 tackles on the roster. So also here, if we have an injury, no one who can step up. Linebackers, there are a lot of linebackers, but they have 3 top linebackers. And after that, there's a big drop off. Only 3 or two good defensive ends. Also there, the drop off to the third defensive end is huge, and only one free safety and strong safety on the roster. We're talking about a 40-man roster, and I was trying to find anything for the Cardinals. On paper, they look really, really good. It's just depth, and the critical success factor is the defense. We said on paper they look really, really good, but last year they allowed 411 points, which was worst in the division and third worst in the NFC. So the defense definitely needs to step up, but they invested their third overall pick in Bruce Smith, edge rusher, and I'm really looking forward what he can do in his first game. He already had 2 tackles, 1 hurry and 1 sack, so maybe Bruce Smith is the missing piece, and therefore he and overall the defense is my critical success factors for the Cardinals to maybe finally win this division.
Yeah, I mean, I talked a lot about the Cardinals on the last episode, and I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there. Whilst we were talking, obviously, anyone saw the stats when I pulled them up. Peyton has already got 3 rushing touchdowns this year and 200 yards. So the guy's insane. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, St. Louis Cardinals, I think, will be up there. I agree with you. It's depth. Depth is the challenge. But it's a challenge for most teams with a 40-man roster, and it's where do you kind of have the gut out, really. So yeah, I kind of agree. I'm excited to watch the Cardinals, especially after their game just now. I'm really excited to see how they do this year. Let's move on to probably. I mean, I think it's fair to say, my personal opinion anyway, the Giants have been the most disappointing team in the RFL for the past 3 seasons. This team finished 4-12 last year, but on paper, this team should be better. I think when you look at the strength of this team, I mean, it's not going to be rocket science for me to work this one out. That basically the defense is the strength of this team. I mean, we're talking about guys like Singletary. We're talking about the likes of Long. We're talking about some of the very, very best defensive players in the league, and we haven't even got to the strong safety Fennick. I mean, Cobb. I really like this defensive unit. So for me, it's the defensive unit. And I think they are going to be one of the best pass rushing teams in this league. I think this year, and it should be for a while, really. Given that they've got so much talent up front, they can kind of get away with it with the cornerback situation. But I do think it is the weakness of this team. There is a lack of just general basics in this cornerback area. There's no top end elite speed. There's no one who's going to cover a wide receiver 1, in my opinion. So they're going to really, really need this front end to put a lot of pass rush presence on the quarterback on that offensive line they are playing against to solve the problem for them. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not looking forward to basically seeing like someone like Jenkins marking a wide receiver 1. I think he will get absolutely blitzed most of the time, and there's going to be even more pressure on Fennick and the safety position to try and solve some of this for them. So for me, that's the weakness. In terms of the critical success factor, it's going to be no surprise from what I've just said, which is basically the defense has basically got to force turnovers. If this defense can force turnovers, force difficult field positions for the offense that they're playing against, then this team will be successful again. I haven't even talked about the offense for this team. The offense is great, but I think the strength is just so obvious in terms of that front line that I have to call that out for the Giants. Do I think the Giants should be in the playoffs? Yes, probably should be in the hunt for it. They're definitely not a 4-12 team, in my opinion. But, are they going to continue to be the most disappointing team in my eyes in the RFL this season? Down to them to prove me wrong.
Yeah, tough to say anything about the Giants. I totally agree. On paper, they look good, but right now in this division, I don't think that they will make the playoffs. I mean, we're talking about divisional and conference projections in the end. But yeah, so far, really looking forward to see Andre Reed in this offense. But yeah, hopefully they can turn it around, especially with those superstars on defense. So let's switch over and talk about the NFC Central and the division winner of last year, the Minnesota Vikings. They went 12-4. And yeah, as strength, you have to talk about the defense. 2 years ago, third best defense in the league. Last year, best defense in the league. And yeah, this is just incredible. And now the key strength, they also upgraded on pass rusher. They traded for Jacob Green, absolute superstar for the Pittsburgh Steelers, had 17 sacks last year, 28 the year before that. So he should be an absolute monster for the Minnesota Vikings, 28 years old. And in addition to that, they traded into the first round. They did not have a first rounder, picked Freddie Joe Nunn at 25th overall, 81 overall edge rusher. He looks really good on paper and already has 2 sacks in the first game, which proves my point. This defense just got a little bit better, which is really, really scary when we talk about this defense that has already been absolute elite. Absolute elite, well, maybe that's my weakness because I'm kind of missing the absolute superstars. When we look at the best players, guard, running back, quarterback, defensive end, yeah, we mentioned that, but after that, lots of 80 overall players, also high 80s, but yeah, not really the absolute superstar, this awesome star receiver. Of course, it's white on paper, but he's also getting a little bit older. So maybe that's one of the weaknesses. As you can tell, it was really, really hard for me to find a weak spot for the Vikings. And I promise you, I will talk about them later again. My critical success factor is playoff performance. I don't know how the Vikings will solve that, but somehow they have to solve this issue. For the last 5 years, they've been in the division, in the playoffs every time. 4 of those 5 seasons, they went 12-4. So the Vikings are one of the most successful teams over the last 5 seasons, but they haven't even made the Super Bowl. And that's really, really big critical success factor. They need to be consistent. I don't know if it's a playbook thing, strategy thing in the playoffs. Maybe it's age or something like that. I have no idea. But if Russ can figure out how to be successful in the playoffs, the Minnesota Vikings should be up there with the Redskins as the Super Bowl favorites for the NFC.
Yeah, probably one of the deepest teams in the league, the Vikings. I guess for me, the thing I would say is that they're a bit light on the sort of the back situation. So any injury to Edwards, Langford, or Livers means that they're going to probably be struggling with that position. So that's the only thing I think I could see as an additional weakness that you pointed out there. But let's jump over to the team that finished second in the Central, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this is a team that I think surprised me last year. I mean, we can talk about Boomer again as much as we like, but I'm not going to call him out as actually the strength of this team because I don't think it is. For me, I think the strength for this team is this offensive line. They put a lot of money and a lot of effort into it last season, and it did pay dividends. And, we've got some really big names in terms of this offensive line. So we've got the likes of, Cross, we've got Powell, Donaldson. Some really, really good offensive line pieces sort of sitting in there. That's really, really helpful and really, really solid for this team. But we can talk about that. But I think it's both lines in terms of the strengths. So I think the defensive line is good as well. So we've got obviously Selman, the brothers actually, Selman, I think they're brothers, Selman brothers. And then we've got the likes of Gradishar and co kind of picking up the bits here. So for me, I think that this team is just the actual lines are very, very solid, and that's what gets this team going. When I talk about the weaknesses, then we get into specialist players. I think the receiving core is actually probably one of the weakest sections of this team and probably the thing that holds them back. I don't see anyone in there that I would really want to be sort of my top end receiver. Brooks, Cefalo, Haggins and Johnson are all not the greatest receiving core. I think they're going to struggle in terms of that set, and I think it puts a lot more pressure on Boomer to find targets because he's not going to get some of those elite open opportunities that maybe more talented receivers would kind of give for him. So for me, I think that basically where this team is going to be successful and the critical success factor is essentially they are going to basically need to overachieve with that receiving core. And the pressure really comes on those lines, the offensive line in particular, to kind of do that. If they can get that over the line, then this team's going to continue to be a top team and be a playoff team. But for me, that's the thing that I think is going to need to be demonstrated this year. Once again, is that whether that receiving core, which is just a hodgepodge of interesting players who I necessarily wouldn't play as a receiver 3, kind of doing the job for them.
Yeah, it was really interesting last season. They had such a good start to the year and looked unbeatable. Won also against the Saints, and after that, it was downhill for them. And they even lost the division and lost in the first playoff round. So, will be interesting to see how they bounce back. Looking at the Detroit Lions, they finished 7-9 last year, and for me, the key strength is Bobby Herbert. He is in his third year now, one offensive rookie of the year in the 1983 quarterback class, where we also had some other big names. Pretty impressive, 2 good seasons, and I'm really looking forward what he can do in his third season as an only 24-year-old. He looks really, really good and is the second best player on the team already on the most important position. So that's definitely a key strength. Key weakness also here for me, tough to say. Maybe also absolute superstar, something like that. They have decent players that are kind of mid of the league, and I will talk about that in a second. But yeah, no one who's a real superstar and maybe an absolute game changer. Also for the longer future, except from Herbert, and which brings me to my critical success factor. And honestly, I don't know if I want to have success for the Detroit Lions right now. Because when we look at the history, the last 5 seasons, they had 7, 6, 7, and 8 wins. So maybe for the Detroit Lions, it's not about having success. And the critical success factor is maybe to tear everything down, trade players, get draft capital, and have a complete restart. Of course, not trade everyone. There are really interesting core pieces of this team, but it looks like over the last seasons, the Lions are not able to bring themselves into playoff contention and get over the hump. So maybe the critical success factor is kind of an extreme step to be really bad for 1 or 2 years and then be good again. Because so far, for me, this team will end 7-9, 9 or 7, something like that, maybe 8-8. I will be totally surprised if they win less or if they win more than this. But I see them somewhere in between a 9-7.
Yeah, I kind of agree. They're a mid pack team at the moment, but for me, I think the critical success factor is consistency. I mean, Stuart as a GM, this Lions team has been the streakiest team I have seen in the RFL. So they will go on runs where they win 4, 5, 6 games, and then they'll lose 4, 5, 6 games, and then it completely turns around their entire season. I don't know how they solve that problem, I have to say, but I think if the Lions could be more consistent and actually keep that run going, and then we could be talking about them as a playoff team. I don't see it happening this year, though. I kind of agree with you. I think it's a travesty Herbert won the Rookie of the Year. I'm going to say that on this podcast because I can. But I think they're going to be a mid-tier team again, and I think they're going to be inconsistent as streaky as they have been the past few seasons. So yeah, I don't know if I agree tanking to the bottom is the right thing for the Lions. I think there's enough about this team to kind of get it together. I think it maybe is a bit of strategy, a bit of playbook, a bit of refining some of their strengths, and then they could be there. But yeah, I agree. The Lions are probably not going to be playoffs, and they're probably not going to be one of the worst teams in the NFC this year. But speaking of one of the worst teams in the NFC last year, it was the Green Bay Packers who finished 4-12. Been a bit of an off season for them. The GM has departed, and the previous champion GM has arrived in VG. So this team is bottom of the pit situation, a big franchise, big name to try and rebuild this team. And I'm obviously going to start with the strength and basically say the GM who's just come in won the Super Bowl, not last season before. So for me, that's the biggest strength, is you've brought in a winner. So that's probably going to be the biggest thing that's going to help this team begin with. Clearly, it is a big job, and this team is not going to be a playoff team this year. So for me, I think it's just getting him in, getting him through the door, trying to solve that problem is the big thing. And then they've already got one of the pieces that I think is the critical success factors for this team going forward, and that is Jim Mahone. So he is an elite quarterback. He's still got a good age on his side, so he can be part of this rebuild. No surprise that he has had probably one of the best games of his life in the first opening game this season. Not surprised about that, given that the GM is there, but he will transform. Mahomes will transform. I'm sure he will throughout the season, and that'll be the shining light and the critical success factor for them going forward. Is getting him better opportunities, better numbers, and it'll make this team better. In terms of the weakness, I mean, there's quite a lot of weaknesses with this team. I could talk about a lot of them. For me, I think it's the sort of, particularly it's the upfront defensive line is pretty terrible. They've got Martin and pretty much nothing else at the moment, so it's going to be a really weird situation. Given that Fiji's come from the Saints and some of the talent they had there, I think it's going to be a redown tools, rebuild, and that sort out that defensive line basically. Hopefully at some point, but I think that's going to allow a lot of additional opportunities for the opponent's offense to kind of get through, because they're going to be a bit leaky there. Yeah, definitely not a playoff team this year, but hopefully there's going to be some positive signs come out of Green Bay.
Yeah, there can always be a surprise with VG as an owner and GM. He's proven that he's able to transform teams and make them successful. And therefore, I'm especially looking at the rookies. Most of them already played in week 1. So Green Bay Packers, as you said, might be a multiple year project. But yeah, really looking forward what they could do in this division. And another team that was even worse than the Green Bay Packers last year was the 1-15 Chicago Bears. And if I remember correctly, they won the first game and lost the rest of the games. And looking at week 1, they won the first game again. So hopefully nothing will repeat itself. But I'm really, really positive about the Bears, because their key strength is their rookies. And we talked a lot about their draft strategy, trading back, and the players that they acquired. And I think they have really, really good ones. Also, Sleeper and Banks, who already had 102 receiving yards in his rookie debut game as a 4th-round pick. They're really, really good. And that's just what the Bears needed. And therefore, also my critical success factor is player development and finally be relevant again. And with this rookie class, they have the chance to be relevant again. When we look at history, they won 1 game last year, 3 games the 2 seasons before that, each season, and then 7 games, 3 games, 8 games. And last time they made the playoffs was 1978. So the Bears need to be relevant again. And it's not about being successful right now. So the key critical success factor really is develop the players and continue the way they're currently doing. I like what the Bears did this offseason, and finally they could be relevant again for the upcoming years. I skipped the weakness, and of course this team is not done yet. So looking at weakness, definitely they need to add a better tight end. Their best tight end is 64 overall, and there are also some holes on defense. But yeah, it's not about the weakness for this team. It's really about the way they're currently on. And I like what the GM has done with the Bears over the last 2 years, and hopefully they can continue doing so, especially with Doug Flutie as a very, very promising rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they're not going to be a playoff team this year, and hopefully they can get more than 1 win this year, which will show the progress this team is making. But a lot of rookies to bed in, a lot of talented rookies to bed in, and we'll see how that kind of pans out. I'm just going to throw this out there. I mean, if they want a blueprint, go and look at the Washington Redskins. That is exactly what they did, and look at where they are now. So it can be done. We've seen it before, and yeah, I look forward to seeing the Bears back in playoffs, back in sort of contention, hopefully sooner rather than later. But let's turn our attention over to a team that has definitely been relevant the past few seasons, and that is the New Orleans Saints. Big off season for them. You know, we talked about Green Bay earlier. New GM coming in, a completely new way of looking at things. I think it's fair to say, trying to put their stamp down on this team. And when you look at the strengths of this team, there is still a lot of strengths. For me, I think probably they have, in my opinion, the best tight end pairing in this league. I really like Christensen. I think he's really, really solid receiving and sort of blocking tight end, sensor, I should say. who is really, really solid. He only is 74, but he's, look at his numbers. He's not far away from being a solid receiving tight end. So for me, I quite like that pairing, and I think that's probably one of the best that we're going to see. And I'm sure we'll talk about others, but for me, I really like that pairing at tight end in particular. So I think that's kind of where I think their strength is. I mean, we could talk about Fuller and Co, but I think it's just a bit of a unique pairing there. When we talk about sort of the key weaknesses, I mean, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that I'm going to talk about the cornerback situation. For me, I think on paper they've got sort of speed still there, but some of those tackling numbers are pretty atrocious in my opinion. And I do wonder whether they're going to be a bit vulnerable there in terms of some of the opportunities beyond having Beard in terms of sort of back situation. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what this team needs to kind of be successful this year, there's a lot of things that have got to go their way. One, they've got to keep the consistency they've had with the previous GM in terms of the numbers. Some of them are astronomically outrageous, and they're clearly not going to get to that level again. But they still need performance out of the likes of Steve Fuller. They still need him to put up some of these MVP-like numbers to be a playoff team this year. So for me, I think that's going to be the critical success factor. Can Steve Fuller, who on paper is not an MVP candidate, continue to put up MVP numbers? If he can, this team will be a playoff team. If he can't, then I think they're probably not going to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, and maybe that's an overreaction for week 1, but I'm really, really critical. They lost against the Bears 10-38, and that's definitely a lot. The Bears look better than last year, but still, we were talking about the 2 times Super Bowl champion in the Saints. Huge turnaround in the roster, of course, but right now, as an overreaction, I think there's a real chance that they could miss the playoffs. Always depending on the owner, if he can draw the right conclusions from that game and adjust the playbook and strategy and everything. But so far, that's one of the worst possible starts to the season that you can have. Yeah, and if the Saints don't win the division, there are 3 teams who want to win this, and one of those teams could be the Atlanta Falcons, who had a really, really good run, 10-6 last season, and lost against Washington in the championship game. And the Falcons, really, really impressive, and their key strength is the future, kind of. When we look at their top 7 players, all of them are 27 years old or younger. So on paper, the Atlanta Falcons looked really good last year, could look really good this year, and will also look good in the future. Their tackle duo is the best in the league with Zimmerman and Covert, 23 and 25 years old, 97 and 89 overall. So this is really, really good. The key weakness for me is an injury that happened in the preseason. Their best running back, George Rogers, got injured and is out for 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, last season he was a key piece here with 700 yards, 10 touchdowns. So this could be a big blow. Charles White, of course, could step up, had even more rushing yards than Rogers last season, but it was really the 1-2 punch that they had last season. So at least for half of the season, they won't have that. So running game, I think, is something really important for the Falcons strategy, because the key success factor, not only because of this injury, but now even more, is their quarterback in Ron Jaworski, 34 years old, 85 overall. Looking at the progression, his arm got worse, his endurance also, and accuracy also too worse. Intelligence got improved a little bit, but still he's getting worse, and he's older, only 1 year left on his contract. Does he still have what it takes to lead this team to maybe the divisional championship, and maybe even more? 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions last year, and looking at the first game, already 1 interception and no touchdown. He needs to get better if the Falcons really want to win this division.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be an interesting one to see whether they can leapfrog the Saints this year. Some real talent on this team. I agree. I think Karowski is going to be the big deciding factor for them. Whether he has a drop off or not will be interesting to see. Let's move on to another team that I think will be trying to protect this division this year, which is the Los Angeles Rams. On paper, they were 8-8 last year. I think beginning of last season, projected that this team should be possibly competing for the division, and I'm going to say it again this year. I think they should be this year. Things I really like about this team, particularly in terms of their strengths, in terms of the offensive line, again, I really like the tackle situation they've got. They've got two of the best tackles in the league, which is going to help them in terms of some of their run and pass game, I think, in particular, given that some of that offensive line beyond them is sort of a bit average. So I think that's going to be the sort of thing that's going to decide sort of helping them going forward. I think when we start to look at sort of the weaknesses, for me, I think it's actually the QB situation. I think they've got two, good quarterbacks in Schroeder and Kenny, but none of them, they don't really stand out as really, really great quarterbacks. Not the types of guys that you really see as sort of being a contending team in particular. And I think, that's going to be their limiting factor. They're going to have to work a lot within that. But in terms of the critical success factor, I think it's going to be a case of really trying to maximise some of this defensive unit. This is where I haven't put it as a strength in particular. But there's pockets of really, really good depth in here. So, we talk about, I know Coleman's sort of currently holding out, but we've got the likes of Plummer, Spanny, Clark, Brooms, Baker. Really, really good defensive players, and their back situation is pretty solid as well. I like Gray, and I like the likes of Wright and Co. Breeden's pretty solid. His speed's a bit down though, but I like that defensive line. For me, I think it's going to be a case of, can that defensive line go from being, let's say, a mid-tier sort of defensive line to being one of the top 10, top 5, and that might just squeeze the difference up, because I think the offensive quarterback situation is going to mean they're going to be average. And they're going to need to get some level of eliteness from somewhere, and I think that's where they could get it from. What does that mean in terms of record? I think, given they were 8-8 last year, I think they're probably going to be 9-7, so I think they're just going to miss out on the playoffs, I think, this year. But yeah, the Rams, interesting one to watch. I think there's a couple of moves or something that could happen, I think, with this team in particular this year that might bump them up. Seeing how the Saints performed in week 1 in particular, they could be seeking an opportunity now to really add some veteran firepower to get them over the line.
I like their first round addition in Jerry Gray, so let's see what they can do also with Baker on edge rush, as you said. Quarterback situation is something we mentioned for all the teams in this division, so maybe if he plays average and the rest of the quarterbacks in this division play average, they have a chance. They started with 1 win, so that's good. Really interesting to see what the Rams can do. Talking about the final team of this division, and I think that's one division where we really have some good teams and no favorite for the division first place, second, third, and fourth place. We're talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and as a strength, they're making it very, very easy, is the wide receiver situation. They had Henry Allard, who had a big case for Offensive Player of the Year last year. He was really, really good, former 7th overall pick, now in his 3rd season. But the new star in town is Jerry Rice. They traded up first overall. We talked about him a lot, and he already proved that he can be a reliable target. Caught 4 out of 5 passes in the first game for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. The strength is definitely the wide receiver core. Weakness, on the other hand, talking about defense and especially the secondary, cornerbacks, they have Mark Lee, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the league, but that's about it. The rest of the cornerback group is lower average. Free safety, strong safety, also really good players there. Will be interesting if there are 1 or 2 players who can step it up, and they need to get better on defense. But still, the key success factor for me is not getting better on defense, but figuring out the quarterback situation. Here we go again. Eric Hipple, we mentioned him also in previous episodes, 81 overall, 27 years old, former fourth round pick and started for the 49ers for 3 consecutive years now. It's his 4th year as a starter, and he's not bad by any means. Will be interesting to see if now with a very elite receiver core, he can also be an elite quarterback. First game looked good, no interception, 2 touchdowns, 187 yards, and good completion percentage. But maybe also here, quarterback situation is what holds the Niners back. Critical success factor. If Eric Hipple can be their guy, I think the Niners could win this division.
And a bold prediction there to round out the NFC. So, we have flown through every single team, giving our thoughts and views in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and what they need to succeed. Let's just fire through it. I mean, NFC. Redskins are going to win it, Wobbegong? I think. What do you think?
Yeah, NFC East. I think you have to go with the Redskins. As I would love to go with the Cardinals, but I did it last year and got burned. So there's no reason why I should bet against the Washington Redskins.
And I think so. And the Central, I think Vikings again. Do you see Tampa Bay at all?
I could see them, but I said I will talk about the Vikings because I think right now, if I have to predict, I think the Minnesota Vikings will make the Super Bowl. And maybe that's wishful thinking because I think they have to do it one day. But yeah, for me, it's the Minnesota Vikings in the Central. They will win it.
Okay, and then we move on to the West. Are you sticking with San Fran as taking the division?
Yeah, maybe that's an overreaction from week 1, but I think they could have what it takes. And I like what they're doing on wide receiver and on offense. I think this division is totally up to anyone, and maybe it's San Francisco this year.
So I think the Rams. I'm going to throw the Rams out there as the team taking the West, but I could see San Fran or Atlanta taking it. I actually, the only team I can't see taking it this year is the Saints, which is really surprising. But that brings us to the conclusion of the NFC. You've got Minnesota down as your Super Bowl contender. I'm gonna stick it, and I'm gonna make a bold claim here and say St. Louis. St. Louis taking the Super Bowl. They won't win the division, but they could get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, would be typical the first season where I don't put my bet on the Cardinals that they will win it all. Will be interesting. I'm definitely rooting for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess, are there any teams, before we round out to the AFC, any other teams that you think could be interesting to mention in terms of maybe not making the playoffs if they should, or making the playoffs if it doesn't necessarily look like they are? Any other final thoughts before we move over to the AFC and talk about that conference?
Yeah, I think it's the typical contenders with the Cowboys. I think they could be better again this year, or maybe winning 9 or 10 games. That could be enough. Cardinals, of course, Central, Buccaneers. I think we have a lot of teams, but I don't see too many surprises except from NFC West, where basically everyone could win it. But I don't think that Green Bay or Chicago is ready to make the playoffs yet. This could look different in a few weeks, but right now I don't think there are too many surprises in the NFC.
Okay, let's turn ourselves over to the AFC then and talk about the other conference. For those of you who are following the NFC, you can log off now and go and get yourself a drink or something. We're going to crack on and talk about the AFC. Let's start. We've got to start with I think we've got to start with your team, Wobbegong, the Buffalo Bills. So this team obviously was 13-3 last year. Obviously got to the Super Bowl. Didn't quite get to that lofty heights that it has been historically. But, interesting team to look at and analyse, I think. It's no surprising when I talk about the strength of this team. I'm obviously going to be talking about the defensive defence. It's just phenomenal. We're talking about Gastineau, probably one of the best defensive ends in the league. Townsend, one of the best defensive ends in the league. Robinson, one of the best linebackers. Jackson, one of the best linebackers. Taylor, one of the best linebackers. I mean, we can go on. Claiborne, Jackson. This defense is absolutely stacked. I mean, it's going to be very hard to do anything against this defense this year, as it has been for the past few seasons. So, no surprising. I think the Bills' strength is their defense. Talking about sort of their critical success factors, I mean, we'll carry on. The defense has got to be consistent and continue to be a top 5 defense. If they can force turnovers, force lower percentages, opportunities for the offense that they are playing against, then this team is going to once again be one of the better teams in the league, which is not surprising. But when we talk about the weaknesses, I think there's 2 weaknesses I'm going to pull this team up on. One is Osiki. So obviously he had a good season last year. It was solid. I mean, good in terms of rookie seasons. He's got to continue to progress. He's got to continue to make movement forward. His percentages were pretty bad last year. Given that he is with a very good offensive line and good receiving set, that's something I think could hold the Bills back. But he needs to make that progression and leap forward. Look at the training camp; it was a little bit disappointing, if I'm being honest with you, for a sleeper. Accuracy went up, speed went up a little bit, but nothing else, which means that, I think I would have liked to have seen that speed go up a little bit more, possibly. Maybe some of that agility go up. I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, position skills got to continue to improve as well. And then I'm going to point out, I think the weakest part of this team really is this tight end situation. So, you've got Newsom, who's a good receiving tight end, solid enough, but then you've got Kay, who is not the world's greatest tight end. So for me, it's going to mean that consistency in the run game, receiving game, for those options are going to be few and far between. If Newsom goes down, that tight end situation is looking pretty sketchy at best, really. So, I'm talking about thin hairs margins here. The Bills were 13-3 last year. They're probably going to be 13 or 14 and 2 or 3 this year again. The team's got better. For me, those are the deciding factors, I think. But Wobbegong, your team, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, Osiecki is a sleeper, and it was really risky for me to start him last season as a rookie and traded away my star quarterback in Stout. He needs to get better, develop his player skill, and will be interesting to see if he can do that and get more consistent, especially with a percentage, as you correctly pointed out. My favorite addition is Ronnie Lott on free safety. 98 overall, 26 years old, and I wanted to have an absolute superstar free safety, and he's the best you can get. He just signed a massive contract, for the next 5 years. So he will be a Buffalo Bill, and that's really nice. Looking forward what he can do for my already really good defense. So I like the offseason. Let's see what the season can do. Looking at the second best team and another team that won or got into the playoffs was the Miami Dolphins with 11-4-1. They had a really good stretch of impressive wins and where really everything clicked. And one of this reason last year was the Marino-Dickerson combination. And we had some really good quarterback and running back situations. And last year was the first year where they could prove it after some injuries in the rookie year. The second year was really good. Then Marino had 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So cut this interception number in half. Will be interesting to see what he can do in his third year. But especially Dickerson, finally a healthy season last season, which was really good with 15 touchdowns and 1,700 yards. And if both continue to get better, this is one of the best quarterback running back combination there is, especially in the AFC. Weakness for me right now, it's really wide receiver and cornerback. Those are the weakest positions group, in my opinion. They only have 3 cornerbacks on the roster. And behind Irvin, not much else. Wide receiver, same. They have Swan, who's already 33 years old, and Clayton, also in this draft class with Marino and Singletary, but Dickerson, sorry, not Singletary. Still, I think wide receiver 3 is a question mark. So wide receiver and cornerback, biggest weakness. And critical success factor is staying healthy. We saw what the difference could make last season compared to the season before. Most of the roster stayed the same, but they just stayed healthy and made the playoffs. And this will be a critical success factor this year. They already have 2 injuries from first week, nothing serious, but Mark Clayton already out for 1 or 2 weeks. And now wide receiver gets even worse. So staying healthy, that will be key success factor for the Miami Dolphins to be successful in this division again.
Yeah, I think health is the main thing for the Dolphins. If they can stay healthy, they'll be there or thereabouts this year. Be pushing all the way. They had a really good end of season run last year, so looking to see if they can continue that. They obviously won week 1 today, so the Dolphins will certainly be up there again. But we move on to another team in the AFC East, and that is my Indianapolis Colts. And I am going to say that I think Wobbegong deliberately did this to me. He said, we'll do it on record. And I didn't look until I actually got the list down in terms of the teams I had. I had my own team. So I'm going to blame you, Wobbegong, for this. But in terms of my analysis of the team, the key strength, I mean, it's going to be obvious, right, for everyone. It's going to be Elway. John Elway is like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, probably one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. So for me, ensuring that he continues to play to his strengths, which means having good protection, which we have worked on this off-season. I talked about maybe a little bit last episode, has been a key piece to that. So that's going to be the strength of this team. In terms of the weaknesses, I think anyone who's looked at this team will see that we've basically got Largent as our sort of receiver one, and then outside of that we've got Pittman and Harry, who not the world's greatest receiving options. So for me, it's going to be a case of, can we get enough production out of them if we give Elway enough time to make them look better than probably their ratings are in particular? And then, of course, the critical success factor is going to be, can we keep John Elway healthy? If we can keep him healthy, I'm sure we'll be there or thereabouts in terms of playoff competition. That's going to be the big deciding factor for the Colts, I think, this year. So it was quite a straightforward one, talking about one player for a few minutes. Wobbegong, anything else you want to say about the Colts?
Yeah, your O-line is just lights out, one of the best in the league. I mean, your 2 guard additions, we talked about that last edition, that's crazy. And you're doing a great job in ensuring or doing your best in keeping Elway healthy. So this O-line looks really good. Another key critical success factor for me would be signing Leslie Frazier, who's currently on a holdout, if I saw that correctly. So he, I think, is very important for your cornerback room, second best cornerback, if I saw that correctly. So, your team is really, really good, especially on offense. And when seeing the grades, Rasp always sends an overview of offense, defense, and your team has the best offensive grade in the league. And yeah, totally well deserved, especially with this O-line and quarterback situation. That's very scary for everyone else in this division. Yeah, speaking about the rest of the division, we had the Patriots, who came out from a really interesting 7-9 year. They won a few games in the end. That it did not look that bad. It looked even worse through big parts of the season. But yeah, what do they need to do to be successful again? I think their key strength is the top end players. When we look at the roster, they have some superstars. Haynes, one of the best cornerbacks in the league, 100 overall, together with Claiborne, the best cornerback in the league. Rogan, 98 overall quarterback. A really good guard and tackle, tight end, wide receiver, free safety, running back. The list goes on and on. They have really good top end players. And maybe the weakness is the age structure when we want to look into the future, because most of those top end players are 30 years old or older. So their window is now. Maybe they have 2 or 3 years left. But yeah, that's not a weakness for this season, maybe for the future. But the critical success factor is not any player or any position group, anything on this team. It's really that they need a 100-degree turnaround, because I don't know what changed. The roster nearly stayed the same, but they have been 15-1 2 seasons ago, and last season 7-9. I don't know what happened. And the Patriots need to do everything they can to go back to this 15-1 season, use playbook strategy, I don't know, but somehow turn their strategy around, because the roster is pretty similar. They have good talent on the team. They just need to get their horsepower on the streets, basically, and then the Patriots can be a scary team again.
Yeah, I mean the Patriots are an interesting situation now. Do they continue to go for it with some of the aging roster, or do they scale back a bit? I mean, the potential is there. We've seen it historically. They have had some phenomenal performances in the past, and Patriots are going to be one of those. We'll look to see how they go over the first couple of weeks, and then we'll get a good picture of it. But let's turn our attention over to the New York Jets. So a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, had a losing record. Right, they've had a good off season though, and when we talk about their strengths, I mean, for me, I think they probably have the best wide receiver set in the league, in the likes of Chandler and Jefferson. Obviously, Jefferson coming over from the Saints, where he sort of signed a big contract a couple of years ago and looked like he well earned his value of that. So for me, I think that's probably the best receiving core duo in the league. That tied with O'Brien, going to be really, really fun to see that kind of play out. So no surprising that when I talk about the critical success factor, it's going to be getting production out of all of that. If they can get production out of those three guys, this team could be one of the best offenses in the league, and that's regardless of everything else that's sort of sitting here. When I talk about the weaknesses, for me, I think there's a couple of things. I think the defensive line is okay, but it's very light when the rotation and depth when you get there. So we talk about the likes of Marshall, who had such a great season last year and the year before. Looks like a very, very good defensive end. But you go beyond that, and we're looking at the likes of Liebenstein, Mitchell, Sims on the practice squad. But then we've got Mass, who's sort of a good defensive tackle. But beyond that, you haven't got much else. So for me, I think that's a big weakness. If these guys get injured or if they need supporting players, there's nothing really there. And I haven't even got onto the fact that we can talk about some of this other sort of depth and issues in the linebacker situation. But for me, up front, that's going to struggle for them. But yeah, I don't think the Jets are going to be a playoff team this year. I think they'll probably be 8-8 if I had to put a number on it. I think they'll be a good team, but they're not going to be your 10-11 wins that you need to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, it will be interesting, but I think they did some good moves on offense. When we look at history, they have been one of the worst 10 offenses for the last 5 years. And now with those additions, and of course, trading away Ronnie Lott, but using all this draft capital that they got to invest into the offense, signing Jefferson was a really, really good deal for them. And yeah, if they get the offense clicking, I think they have the chance. But I agree, maybe especially with the other teams in division, maybe just one step back. Maybe they can surprise us. I think last year I had them as a surprise division winner or second place. I really got burned there. So I'm being cautious with the New York Jets. Well, this was the AFC East. So let's continue with the AFC Central and the team that got into the Super Bowl, the Houston Oilers. They are such a good team. And for me, I could list many strengths, but I think it all starts with Ben Foots. And looking at the history, they won the championship in 1980. After that, they made the playoffs, then missed it 2 years in a row. Last year was the first season for 3 years where they went into the playoffs again. I think one of the biggest reasons is Dan Foots. I don't remember when the trade happened. I think it was 2 seasons ago where they traded for Dan Foots from the Chargers. 34 years old, of course, not the youngest. 99 arm is the best arm in the league. And last season, he proved to be pretty consistent, especially in the playoffs. So the numbers in the regular season, don't look too overachieving, but in the postseason, he really stepped up his game, 81% completion percentage. And I think if he can continue with that, this is the key strength of the team. Weaknesses, again, similar to the Dolphins, it's wide receivers and cornerbacks. For me, they have some weapons, and they have, of course, a good tight end, but on wide receiver, looks really thin. And same for cornerback, they have one aging good player in Gary Barbaro, 81 overall. he's decent, and the rest also has decent speed. But yeah, maybe the lockdown players there on cornerbacks are missing. And the key factor for me on defense is one player that has been very, very impressive in the past, and that's linebacker Robert Brazel. He's 32 years old, still under contract for 4 years. And last season, he had 178 tackles, 58 tackles for loss. He had the same number the year before that, but that's just impressive. In his career, he has 326 tackles for loss. That's incredible. He's such a good run defender on linebacker. Also, 3 forced fumbles last season, and he's the critical success factor. If he can keep up with that and have similar numbers, well, the Oilers will have one of the best defenses again. First game, no tackle for loss, so he needs to get better there. But if Brazel, is similar to the years before that and does not decline just yet, this team should be one of the favorites in the AFC to make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean they're an elite team. Couple of things I'm just going to point out quickly. Anyone's watching on the stream, Brazel's picture is pixelated, so don't blame me for the image of that one. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's the only picture we've got of him. But another thing I was going to point out, which was I didn't realise this until we just talked about them, Wobbegong, but Dan Foots has only played one playoff game price last year in his entire career in the RFL.
Yeah,
Which is absolutely nuts considering how well he did last year. So that's just an interesting bit of history there, I think, to kind of play out, really. So we'll probably won't ever see him on the leaderboards in terms of playoff performances or anything like that. But yeah, crazy situation to see there. But let's keep moving forward, and I have been tasked to have a little look at the Cincinnati Bengals. 11-5 last year, had a really good season. This is a team that I have talked about many times as being a dark horse contender, and I was really pleased to see them have such a good record last year. The playoffs didn't quite work out the way that they would have wanted it to, but on paper, this team I think is a contender. If you're looking at sort of the strength of this team, it is absolutely this linebacking situation. So we've got the likes of Dinkle, who is just a really good linebacker. Basically 29 tackles for loss last year. 10 sacks is pretty good production from a linebacker. You're then pairing him with the likes of Ekern, who is again solid as well. I mean, we're talking about a guy who probably doesn't get the same number of sacks, but 13 tackles for loss. Pretty solid. So for me, that is going to be very interesting to see if that continues to kind of be the strength of this team. And then in terms of thinking about the sort of the weakness, we're going to be talking a little bit about the wide receivers again. I mean, a lot of them are on the practice squad, but if you look at who they've got available, and we talked about Clark previously, solid receiver, Anderson, and then you've got Turner. So you've not really got much elite talent there, and that's going to be something that might hold them back. I think, and probably make it much harder for DeBerg to kind of get the ball up the field in terms of that passing game. But in terms of the critical success factor for this team, it is going to be similar to what I've said to some other teams. The defence basically is going to need to win the battle. It's going to need to be one of the top 10 defences in this league. It needs to be efficient. It needs to prevent points. That's the main thing. To enable this offence, which I think is going to be a bit creaky, to kind of get it over the line. I think I wouldn't be surprised if 11-5 again for this team. That's kind of where I see them. 11-5, 9-7 is probably the boundary I kind of set for this team. I think they're going to be there again. And I'm going to say again, I think this is a dark horse contender team. Not the one I would put down as the team I have as the playoff Super Bowl finalists this year, but I think they're a dark horse again.
Yeah, I agree. Last season, 11 wins. The year before that, 12 wins. So the Bengals are on a really good path. And I agree. The team does not look any worse than last year. So why shouldn't they maybe win the division or at least get a wildcard spot and make a deep run in the playoffs? The team looks good and will be interesting, especially with Steve DeBerg, if he can continue his low interception seasons, and if he does so, the Bengals are totally one team to mention. And another team in this division, and this division is just stacked, are the Pittsburgh Steelers. And their strength is the defense. And I came across the craziest fact I found in the RFL. If you click on history, you see that in all of RFL history, in all the seasons we had, it's 9 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers always had a top 4 defense. They never allowed more than 16.7 points per game in 9 seasons. This is just incredible crazy. This defense historically has been one of the best defenses so far. Last season was the worst, but still a top 4 defense. So this is definitely the strength. They traded away their edge rusher, so I'm a little bit cautious there. But yeah, the Steelers definitely built on their defense, and they proved to do that in the first game, winning against the Eagles 31-7. But this is just one of the craziest stats I've seen in this league. Weakness, maybe the O-line. We talked about many O-lines as strengths, but here their best player on O-line is 87 overall guard, but no guard number 2. Tackles, well, 82, 76, center 73. So I'm really unsure about this O-line, which is maybe one of the biggest weaknesses because my critical success factor is Joe Theismann. And we talked about the QB situation last time. They just signed him in free agency round 6 after the draft. He was still available, played the first game, and had a pretty good game. 1 touchdown, 75% completion percentage. But especially when we talk about this elite defense, Joe Theismann needs to step up after Terry Bradshaw, their star elite quarterback from the past, retired. And the Steelers got worse on offense, so Theismann definitely needs to step up and needs to be the guy, and hopefully a really, really good replacement for Bradshaw. And if he is able to do that, the Steelers, again, should be a playoff team. We're saying that about a lot of teams in the AFC, and this will be a big, big fight. But the Steelers look really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see Theismann back in a starting position, given the past couple of seasons he's kind of not really been there on the teams that he's been with, just given the depth of quarterback situation he's kind of landed himself in. So I'm excited to see the Steelers this year. And that's a crazy stat, by the way. The top 4 defense every single season is absolutely ludicrous. But yeah. So yeah, Steelers, interesting one to look at. Let's turn our attention over to the last team in the Central, and that is the Cleveland Browns. So this is a team that was 3-13 last year. When we look at the strength of this team, it's kind of difficult to pick out, really. I mean, there's a few areas I could talk about. I could talk about the linebackers again and sort of the offensive line, but for me, I've got to talk about Mike Pruitt. So Mike Pruitt is one of the best running backs in the league. I think when you look at his numbers, they're not the level that I kind of would expect them to be for someone of his talent. So no surprise that when I'm talking about this, I'm saying Mike Pruitt basically needs to get a lot of the ball, but he also needs to get the opportunities, and they need to basically find a way to utilise his skills to the best of his ability. I think if they can do that, that is the critical success factor for the Browns this year. Basically, run the ball, guys. That's essentially what I'm going to say. Run the damn ball. Basically, get him avoid that opportunity, because if you can get that rushing opportunity available, the receiving is going to come along with it. They've got Krieg, who is a solid quarterback. There's no denying that, and his numbers have not really been the level we would expect for him again. But for me, I think if they can get that rushing game sorted, running game sorted, then we're going to be in a good situation for the Browns. But in terms of weakness, I'm going to go back to Krieg. I think this guy needs to step it up. His ratings look really, really solid. I'd be very happy to have him as a QB1. But you actually look at his numbers. I mean, last year, they weren't great. So he basically, last year, he played 7 games. I'm not sure if that was due to injury, actually. But if you go to the previous year...
Yeah, it was a big injury.
Yeah. So if you go back to the previous year, 21 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. It's not great, right? He needs to go back to really where he was with the 82-81 season, where it was 17, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. numbers look much, much better in that respect there. So he needs to get back to finding some of that form, which would be really interesting given his injury last year then, and see whether he can do that. For me, that is down as the weakness at the moment, is trying to unlock his ability again is going to be the key thing for the Browns. Given they were 3-13 last year, and given the strength of this division, I think it's going to be tough for them to get closer to sort of 7-8 wins. I think they're probably going to be around the 3-5 mark. So I don't see them making the playoffs again this year, which means they'll have a bunch of questions this offseason, I think, as a team.
Yeah, and this is honestly the first team in the AFC where I would also comfortably say I don't see them in the playoffs. With every other team we talked so far in the AFC, there's definitely a case that they could or should make the playoffs. Dave Creek is kind of a wild card, as you said, with the injury last year. We both expected them to be better. They had a 7-9 season 2 years before that, and we thought, well, maybe next season they could push for a playoff spot. Creek got injured, and the season went to shreds basically, and only 3 wins. They have a really interesting addition on linebacker. We talked about that last episode, but yeah, I agree. I don't think it's enough to already make the playoffs. Last division for today, AFC West, and the division winner last year was the Los Angeles Raiders. Well, that's not totally true because they just moved to Los Angeles. Not sure if this will have any impact on the game. I highly doubt it. It's also not their biggest strength or weakness. So their biggest strength is the secondary. When we look at this roster, the cornerback situation is pretty good. 3 players with 81 or 82 overall. Pretty good for at least this year because 1 or 2 of those players are 34 years old. Strong safety and free safety also looks decent enough, again, with older players. So one weakness could be also the age structure. I don't want to mention that every time, but for this season, their secondary definitely is a key strength. Weakness, I really think, wide receiver. They have lots of players in the 70s, 179 overall player, but maybe there's the superstar missing. I think we talked about Spaniola 1 or 2 seasons ago as a really interesting piece on tight end, but wide receiver core definitely needs to get better. The key success factor, I mean, it's pretty easy. Last season, they have been 10-5-1, made the divisional game and lost. And I looked at the schedule last season, and they won against every team that did not make the playoffs and lost against every team that made the playoffs. So it's pretty simple. They are kind of an average team, and they, of course, had a bad division last season. Critical success factor, finally win against good teams, win against teams that also are projected to make the playoffs. And I think that's really, really important. And week 1, they did so. They won against the Atlanta Falcons, who have been a playoff team last season and definitely a playoff contender for this year. So maybe the critical success factor comes true, and the new Los Angeles Raiders are scheduled to be even better compared to last year in a division that did not get any easier.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's going to be the biggest test for the Raiders this year, given we'll talk about some of the other teams in a minute. But I think, for me, the biggest success factor is going to be Cliff Stout. If he can continue that form that he has, he's now entering probably what you could argue is his prime years at the age of 30. If he can continue to do that, this Raiders team can continue to elevate itself. But yeah, interesting to see how they do in terms of changing location. I have no idea whether they've changed to a dome or not or anything like that, but we'll see. Perhaps they can correct us in terms of the chat and stuff later. But yeah, let's move on and talk a little bit about the Denver Broncos. So we talked a little bit about, obviously, this division was pretty much a runaway last year. The Denver Broncos were kind of in and around the hunt for a little bit, 7-9, but they kind of faded away. And looking at this team, there's some really good things on paper that I like about it. I really like the backcourt punch of the offensive sort of stars. We've got David Woodley, who is having a bit of a renaissance, I would probably say, in terms of his numbers. And then we've got the likes of Ellis and Anderson, sort of two solid sort of running backs. And then we talk about the offensive line again. It's pretty solid, but for me, I think I quite like that situation in terms of they've got star players in the offensive unit that can certainly take this team beyond probably its capability last year. But when you look at the defense and sort of this is where we start talking about some of the weaknesses. I mean, that edge rushing is pretty awful. That defensive line up front is pretty bad. They're going to be leaning a lot on some of these back situations that they've got. The linebacking course on paper is not great, but I think it's okay. I think they're basically going to have to scheme properly, I think, to be effective. It's no surprising they've never been a particularly great defensive unit, but I think scheme is going to be the critical success factor for this team. Given they were 7-9 last year, and if we go and look at sort of their sort of numbers, I mean, it kind of ekes out as why they were 7-9 really, because you look at sort of their middle of the pack for both offense and defense. I think probably offense can get to sort of the top 10 offense probably with a bit of scheming, and I think the defense could probably get to being average with scheming changes. So I think if they did some of that, a bit of playbook time, a bit of strategy, this team could go from, who knows, from 7-9 to, let's say, 10 wins, and I think that'll probably be enough for them to take this division. But that is a big if. That's the big thing they're going to have to get over is, do they have the game plan, the strategy to get themselves over the hump?
Yeah, in this division, we're talking a lot about great quarterbacks, great offenses, maybe weak defenses, and maybe it's a battle in this division who has the least weakest defense, something like that. The Broncos definitely have a case to win this division. I think, it's a team that definitely could step it up or should step it up on defense, especially looking at their first game, 52 points allowed against the Bengals. So, yeah, defense not off to a good start. Speaking about defenses, and the Kansas City Chiefs, 6 wins last season, which was double the amount of the last 3 years combined. So good progress, but still defense here, starting with the weakness, was one of the weakest parts. Well, if you look at the division, it was the second best defense, but 431 points allowed was only in the AFC. Only one team outside of this division was first, which shows or proves the point that this division has really, really weak defenses, and the Chiefs definitely need to get better. They tried to do that by some acquisitions, but this is my critical success factor. Again, defense was the weakness, critical success factor. Some stars need to step up. When we look at the top 10 players, only 2 players are from defense, and therefore my critical success factor is the edge rusher, because these are the only 2 players in the top 10 of this team. Terry Beason, 0 sacks over the last 2 seasons. So he's definitely not a superstar, but he kind of needs to be as a critical success factor for this defense to get better. Curtis Greer, 1 sack last year. So if your 2 best defensive players are edge rushers and have 1 sack combined over the last 1 year, that's not good. So they need to get better on defense. Otherwise, they have no chance to make the playoffs, because their biggest strength is one of the most impressive offenses there are in the whole RFL. And it's a shame if the defense destroys that. But Steve Young, we praised him so much last season. As a rookie, he played lights out, really, really good threat as a passer and as a rusher. And in this offseason, they added Herschel Walker as their new number 1 running back. They added a sleeper tight end. Well, this offense should get even better compared to last season. That's the key strength, and will be interesting to see in the end what it was more important, the elite offense or the really bad defense. I think maybe they're still 1 or 2 years away from making the playoffs, but if they can get this defense better, at latest next year, they should be one of the favorites to win this division.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Chiefs on the last episode, I think, and said I kind of think they're going to be a team it's going to be a gunslinging situation for them every single game. They're going to put up big numbers, they're going to concede big numbers, and it's just whether the margin can go the right way for them. But I like watching Kansas City in terms of this league. I think they're interesting because of Steve Young and this offense, and it's always fun to see what sort of numbers they can put up. And the defense hold enough to get them over the line. Let's jump over to the San Diego Chargers. So I think I mentioned previously about the Giants being a disappointing team. San Diego Chargers are probably my most disappointing team of last season, though, I have to say. I thought this team was a playoff-bound team. I thought they would take this division last year, and they didn't live up to the hype. They won 4 games, kind of faded away, and kind of disappointed, I think, in my opinion. But when we look at the strengths of this team, I mean, we can talk all day about the defensive edge situation. Dolman is elite. Jeffcoat is elite. This team is going to put pressure on offensive quarterbacks, and it's going to be really, really good quality pressure. And so that to me is the sort of the biggest strength of this team. When we talk about sort of the weakness of this team, I mean, when we get down to free safety, we are scraping the barrel in terms of what we've got here. I think that's going to be a bit of an issue for them going forward. They just don't have anyone I would even want to start free safety. Nobody's got any decent speed, any decent agility. It's going to really hold them back, I think, and it's going to mean they're going to have to play certain coverages that are going to be more tricky to kind of manage, I think, in my opinion. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on that up front of Jeffcoat and Dolman to kind of solve that for them. But when we get to the strength, it's no surprise that that's going to be the deciding factor. Is can they consistently put up good numbers with Dolman and Jeffcoat enough to basically hide that weakness? If they can do that, then this team has enough, I think, on the offensive side to get the job done. And I think they could. I say this given that they lost today. They could jump from a 4-12 team to a 9-7 team and really compete for the division title, in my opinion. I still have faith in the San Diego Clippers. Not San Diego Clippers. I have faith in the San Diego Chargers. I still have faith in them. And don't let me down, is what I'm going to say. Last season you let me down, guys. And hopefully you won't this year. And I'll be sitting here going, they're a playoff team. But I really hope so. If not, then they might go into the bucket that I have sitting on my left with the New York Giants and saying probably the most disappointing team in the RFL. And we're going to be having a competition there at that point to see who that is. But yeah, Chargers are an interesting one, I think. Just given that the division, I think, is all up for grabs.
I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if they win it. But honestly, after last season, I would also not be surprised if they have again a disappointed year. So they have to prove us right that they are, could be one of the favorites to win it. And I agree, Dolman is just the most talked person, I think, out of this draft, even more than Jerry Rice, because as a rookie, he's already the fastest edge in the league. 95 overall edge player that's just on an elite defensive position, already 2 sacks and 2 hurries in the first game. I think Dolman could be the absolute superstar and key change here in this division, best defensive player in this division, and turn this Chargers defense around. And hopefully we're talking about a division with really, really good quarterbacks. Hopefully for the Chargers, be someone who is a threat to the opposing star QBs. So very interesting team. And let's get to the last team of today, if I'm not mistaken, the Seattle Seahawks. 3 wins, 12 losses, 1 draw. I don't know where to start here. I mean, they are in the rebuild, and I think that's also their biggest strength, that they are finally in the rebuild. They started that process, I think, 1.5 seasons ago. So the key strength are the rookies. There are lots of them, and it will be interesting to see if they get playing time, if 2 or 3 of these players can be long-term starters. So that's, I think, the key strength. Key weakness, in my opinion, they are still in a rebuild, but for a team in a rebuild, they have way too many old players. They have 12 players who are 30 years old or older, which is not too bad for a playoff contender, but for a team in a rebuild, as Seattle Seahawks, so if you're listening, I would try to do my best to trade away these players, not all of them, but 2 or 3 of them, and get more draft capital or younger players. I think this rebuild won't be done this season. It most likely won't be done next season. And to be on a good way, maybe use what you have on this roster and trade away players that won't be relevant in 3 years. Yeah, and for me, the most critical factor is their quarterback, rookie Randall Cunningham, and maybe the most exciting player on this roster, 5th overall pick. And he, of course, will always be compared with Doug Flutie because he got picked once pick earlier, and Flutie had an impressive first game for the Bears. Randall Cunningham, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, 140 yards, and not the best completion percentage. Critical success factor. If he can step it up and prove to be the QB of the future, the Seahawks can build around him, and maybe if they do everything right, have a playoff contending team in 2 seasons. But for this year, I think 3 or 4 wins, something like that, will be, unfortunately, the reality for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they're a rebuilding team. 2 to 3 wins, I think, is where they're going to end up. Randall Cunningham, I think, it's going to be hard to assess him this year. I think his numbers are going to be down on the lower end, just given what he's surrounded with. So we'll have to come back and assess that Flutie versus Cunningham challenge situation probably about 2 or 3 years' time, I think, once the Seahawks have had some influx of talent and younger players have developed, and we'll hopefully see his promise come through then. But that brings us to a close in terms of the AFC. So, we talked about the NFC. AFC, I think we'll start from the bottom to the top, actually. Let's start with the West. I think probably, I had to put my number on it, I still think Los Angeles are going to take the division this year.
I agree. They have the best defense. I mentioned the secondary as the key strength, and for all other teams, we talked about the defense as a weakness, and I think that could be the deciding factor. At least this season. Next season could be different, but this season, I think the Raiders will win it.
Yeah, I agree. And then in the Central, I mean, I think you've strongly hinted that Houston are probably going to take the Central this year. Do you think that's still the case, or has anyone else swayed you based on our discussion?
Yeah, I think, with 16 games in the season, after 14 games, we won't have a division winner here. It will be a close battle between the Bengals, Oilers, and Steelers. But I think Houston is just too good, both on offense, on defense, and have a really, really good GM who proved to be able to outsmart other opponents, including myself in the playoffs. So I have to take the Houston Oilers as one of the most completest teams here in the AFC.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the Oilers will take it. I think Cincinnati and Pittsburgh will have between 9 and 11 wins between them. So we're going to get another playoff spot out of those two. And it's going to be heartbreak for whoever doesn't make it out of those, I think. I kind of agree. I think Houston will take the division. And then we get to the AFC. I still think the Bills are going to take it this year. There's still too much talent on that roster. And I know you're probably going to say, oh, no, we're not going to take it, and throw me another name. But I think it's between you and Miami again. And then I think the question becomes, are we going to see 3 teams out of the AFC or 3 teams out of the Central in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, wildcard will be an absolute nightmare. When we look at the whole teams, only the Browns and Seattle are the only 2 teams where I say, well, I don't see any chance that they will make the playoffs. After that is the tier with Chargers, Broncos, and Chiefs, whoever does not win in the West. But every team in the AFC East could realistically make the playoffs, and every team in the Central, so Bengals, Oilers, and Steelers outside of the Browns. So I have no idea who makes the playoffs. With that said, division winner, I mean, I always don't want to say Buffalo Bills, but I agree. Good moves in my opinion. I mean, I made them, so hopefully good moves. So I think there's a realistic scenario that the Buffalo Bills could win again, or at least make the playoffs. But my team that I will predict in the Super Bowl, and therefore also as a division winner here, your Indianapolis Colts. I love the moves that you made on offense, and I think your team looks really, really scary, and that's the team I'm scared of the most right now, which means that, in my opinion, this could be the favorite. But I agree, everyone, Buffalo could win it, Miami could win it. I think it will be a close call. But yeah, therefore I'm saying Indianapolis Colts as the division winner and my team or my call for the Super Bowl.
Interesting. I actually am going to put Miami down as my Super Bowl possibility this year. I think I don't think they'll win the division, but I think in the playoff time, I think they've been an interesting one to keep an eye on. Again, if they stay healthy, I'm going to caveat it with that. But yeah, I'd like to see Miami actually get through this year. So in my head, I'm going St. Louis, Miami, which is like this. For me, that's the biggest RFL brand situation. Is Marino, against the St. Louis, Montana. It'll be amazing. That's what I've got in my head for coming through in the AFC, and I think it's going to be incredibly hard. We kind of talked about that, but yeah, I'm going to go a little bit left field and say Miami.
Yeah, there's definitely a scenario. I said in the AFC, it's really, really tough because there's so many good teams and playoff contenders, and there will be 2 or 3 teams that surprisingly won't make the playoffs because they have 9 wins, and that's just not enough in the AFC or something like that. So there's always a chance, and there's no team that's locked for the division and locked for the playoffs. So there is a scenario where also the Oilers maybe won't make the playoffs. I mean, we saw that the years before. Same for Buffalo, same for every other team. So there could be really, really big surprises in the AFC. Maybe it gets boring. We don't know. And that's why we're doing the predictions. We're doing our best to go through the teams, assess strengths, weaknesses, and key success factors. And maybe we're sitting here in a few weeks and everything we just talked about in more than 1 hour goes to shreds, and we have a totally new playoff picture here.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will all go to shreds, and then we'll do our usual playoff picture piece towards the end of the season, and we'll be saying how amazingly right we were, even though we're completely saying the wrong things to what we said on this episode. So, absolutely. Sure. I think we'll see how it plays out. Anyone who's made it through to the whole episode, congratulations. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we've definitely enjoyed trying to analyse some of these teams because there's just so much talent in this RFL and so many good GMs. So I'm going to say wish everyone the best of luck for the season, whatever your outcomes and goals are. Let's see how it plays out. But Wobbegong, as usual, you get the final word. Anything else you would like to say before we close out this preview of 1985?
Yeah, I think we said enough this episode. I hope I still have a voice tomorrow. I don't think so right now, but we did our best to cover everything. So good luck to every GM out there. Will be a very, very interesting season. And we will see or talk with each other again during the season. Until then, yeah, best of luck and lots of fun to every team. And thanks for listening.